Ray, the last day in Latrobe was yesterday, so I ask you very humbly the best development and the worst development of this training camp for the Steelers was what?
Well, I think hands down the best development was George Pickens and how NFL ready he appears to be. Now, listen, we're not going to know until week 1 in Cincinnati, and maybe not even then. You know, it might take a couple of weeks for his talents to show through. But I think the Steelers discovered, and the NFL is going to discover soon, that guy is the real deal. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I don't know, there's a number of different directions that we can go, but I think this has been true really since the end of last season. They really didn't address it in the draft. They tried to in free agency, but the state of that offensive line, it hasn't been good at camp practices. I was not impressed in what I saw in that Seattle game either. So that's probably the biggest issue for me going forward, and that's quite a big issue because, you know, Joe, if there's no pass pro for the offensive line, George Pickens can't get open. If there's no holes, Najee Harris can't be Najee Harris. So that's a rather big one. But, you know, after 3.5 weeks up there, I think that's probably, you know, number one for me when it comes to the negatives of what I saw in camp.
I think you're preaching to the choir with that, Raymond. Joe and I both agree the offensive line is a big issue. How about Devin Bush as a big disappointment?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been good. You know, I don't know that Robert Spillane is the answer either. I think, you know, Spillane can be good in some situations. I shudder to think if he gets matched up on a running back one-on-one. They have to limit his exposure to packages when they're going to play zone defense, and he can sit back and read. He's actually really good when he can do that. He's decent in the run game too. But, you know, in the end, Ron, I don't know if there's an answer on this roster right now. I think they're going to try to get by with some combination of Devin Bush and Robert Spillane in some packages, and then there's going to be others, let's be honest, where they're going to play three safeties. And maybe Terrell Edmonds drops down and becomes a dime linebacker, and DeMonte KZ is sitting back there as strong safety. So there's a number of different directions they can go both schematically and with personnel, and I think, you know, depending on how those guys play once the season starts, a lot of it will depend on whether they get exposed in coverage the way they did against the Seahawks. That was not a good performance for either in that category.
Calvin Austin was a big story, too. Is he still? Is he going to play tomorrow night? Is he going to be ready for the season? I mean, he was a giant story early in camp.
Yeah, Calvin Austin is not going to play tomorrow. He's been in a walking boot for the last, I'd say, week or so. He got injured last Friday in a closed practice, which surprised me because I always assumed that those closed practices the day before a game are mostly walkthroughs. So I don't know exactly how that happened. Apparently Anthony Miller got injured in that same setting. So very unfortunate for Austin. I think obviously he's on this team. He's going to be on the 53-man roster. The big question now as you look at it, you know, in terms of how they shuffle things, is he a guy who goes on short-term IR for maybe 6 weeks and then you bring him back when he's healthy, or do you carry him knowing that he's going to come back maybe week 1, week 2, week 3, and you don't have to put him on IR? But you're right, Joe. He was very good on those jet sweeps. His speed was evident, and, you know, I think luckily for them, they do have some depth at receiver. I think they can get by in the short term without him, but I don't think there's any doubt he's going to be on this roster, you know, come late August, early September.
Raymond, who's going to play tomorrow night? Or I guess maybe a better way to say it is who isn't going to play. Do you anticipate, well, after Cam got banged up a little bit, I can't imagine he's going to play. You think Minka and Watt will play? Najee will play? Would you play them?
I don't think Najee's going to play. I think they do want to get Najee some snaps. I think it'll be in that last preseason game. The luxury they have this year with the way the schedule plays out is they got a 14-day gap between that Lions game and then their opener in Cincinnati. So, you know, you never want to see anyone get hurt in any preseason game. But with 2 weeks there, I think you have a little bit more room than you did in previous years. I would not expect Minka to play, Watt to play. If they do, I think just a series or two. But conversely, when you look at the offense, I think Mr. Trubisky said he wants to play. So he could play up to a quarter. I don't think it's going to be more than a quarter because Mike Tomlin pretty much committed to playing Kenny Pickett with the starting offensive line. So I think you'll see a lot of offensive starters play deep into the second quarter, including the offensive line. So I think kind of makes sense, right? The highest paid players are on defense. You don't want to really expose them to injuries. And then on offense, you kind of want those guys to get going and to play together because everyone is so new. And let's be frank, they need to work.
Ray Fittipaldo of the Post-Gazette. Fridays with Ray, presented by Moosehead Lager. Stay wild. I like that, Ray, don't you? The stay wild part of that read?
I do. Do I get some Moosehead out of this deal?
I don't know. You'll have to check with our boss, Craig Riley. Listen, is this quarterback situation going to play out the way Ron and I think, which is that Trubisky is obviously going to start in Cincinnati. Pickett will be number 2, and then who knows with Rudolph? Is Pickett going to be the backup for that game?
I think it's trending in that direction, but Kenny Pickett has a lot to prove still. And I think, Mike highlighted that yesterday when he talked to us. He wants to see Kenny against frontline defenders from Jacksonville, and he wants to see Kenny, with players he might be playing with in the real game. And he's going to get that opportunity tomorrow. So he did well in his first game. Let's face it, probably 50 to 70% of the guys that he was playing against last week, they're probably not going to be in the league in a week or two. And if they are, they might be on a practice squad. So he did very well in that setting. I'm giving him credit that Mike wants to expose him to a little bit more, wants to get a feel for how he does against better competition and with better personnel. So I think this week is an even bigger stage for Kenny Pickett. If he proves it again this week, under those circumstances, I think he'll be well on the way to being this team's backup.
Do you anticipate Rudolph being here opening day?
I think it's 50-50, and I think it all has to do with Kenny. And I don't mean to dodge the question. I honestly believe that if they're 100% comfortable with Kenny Pickett being this team's backup, that they will have an opportunity to trade Mason Rudolph and maybe flip him for a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, depending on how desperate a team is. But, Ron, if there's any doubts in their minds that Kenny is ready for this, why wouldn't you keep Mason? You could have Mason be your number 2. We've talked about this from the beginning. It wouldn't be ideal for Kenny to be the 3 because he probably wouldn't get the reps in practice, but you always do have that in your back pocket if that's the direction you want to go. But, again, if Kenny's ready, yes, I think he will be the backup week 1 in Cincinnati.
So this is kind of where we began the show today, Ray. This is a giant game for ramifications for the position we've all been talking about for the past year ad nauseum every single day. This is a giant game, isn't it? I mean, if Pickett plays really well, that solidifies him as the number 2 is what I hear you saying. And what if he plays really poorly and Rudolph plays well? I'm just hearing you say it's a game with giant ramifications at that position. Yes?
Absolutely. But again, the last thing you mentioned, Mason going against the 3rd team in the second half, he should do well. So I would not be surprised if Mason Rudolph went out there and lit it up, against Jacksonville, provided he has the pass protection. If he doesn't have the pass protection, then, things could go south pretty quick. So that's where you have to be careful, in these evaluations. If he gets sacked 3 times and he's constantly hurried, I'm going to have a hard time saying that Mason Rudolph played bad. But you're right. I think with Kenny, yes, if he performs under those circumstances close to the way he did against Seattle, then I think he'll be well on his way to being number 2. Yep.
Ray, the cuts don't have to happen, the significant number, until after the 3rd exhibition game. Is there a surprise maybe that we can look at and say, wow, I didn't know that guy was in trouble?
I don't know. Would you consider Anthony McFarland a surprise cut? He's a 4th-round pick. It's clear. It's on the depth chart, and Jaylen Warren told me himself that the coaches moved him up to number 2 this week. And, I wrote a story about his ascension during training camp. He's, if not for George Pickens, guys, he would be the camp phenom. So now you have Jaylen Warren and likely Benny Snell as your number 2 and 3, provided that that Benny's healthy, and I think he might play tomorrow night. And then I think you're going to carry Derek Watt, right? So that's 4 running backs. I don't think they carry 5, and the reason I don't think they do that is because Anthony McFarland has never been a special teams guy since he's been here. Yeah, he can return kicks, but he's been a healthy scratch more than he's been active during his first 2 seasons. So, big week for Jaylen Warren. We know what Benny Snell can do. Jaylen Warren cannot put the ball on the ground again, and he's got to prove he can play special teams too. If he does that, I think he's on this team, and McFarland is probably on the outside looking in.
It sounds like a lot of guys play great special teams here. But there's only so many spots. I mean, Miles Boykin, I'm seeing, is a big special teams guy. Derek Watt, Connor Hayward, Benny Snell. Obviously, you have your return men, you have your linemen, you have your snapper, your kicker, things like that. How many guys? Somebody's got to go, right? How many guys can be special teams aces?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think this is a year, Joe, where you don't keep 9 offensive linemen. I think you can keep 8, and that could potentially open up, an extra spot for a receiver. We really haven't talked about this, but if they are comfortable with it, and I know Mike Tomlin hasn't been comfortable with this over the years, and the Steelers really haven't been comfortable with this over the years, but you could potentially have only 2 quarterbacks on your 53-man roster, and then a developmental guy like Chris Oladokun as your number 3 on the practice squad. Other teams do that. The Steelers haven't done that, but again, that's another way you drop number 3 quarterback, and then you pick up a special teamer among a different position group. So there are all different ways that you can kind of, come up with spots, but, those are 2 right now that I think are pretty decent possibilities here when they, get down to doing this. I think it's August 30th. So they still got some time, but you're right. There are a lot of guys who are just on this team because of special teams. And you got to do more than that. You got to be able to contribute to your position group too. So that's definitely big when they come down to constructing that roster.
We were talking about Pickens being a big winner. How about Gunnar Olszewski? He seems to have really won over a lot of people. I mean, we knew he was going to be a good punt returner, right? But he's working out to be a chance to play some slot, isn't he?
It's only practice, but I'm wondering how he only caught 9 passes in 3 seasons in New England. And I know New England can't develop receivers. I know that. But it can't be that bad. Like, he looks good. He doesn't look out of place. He doesn't drop the ball. He's shifty. He made plays in that Seattle game. I mean, I'm at a loss to figuring out why he wasn't used more by the Patriots. Maybe it's just one of those deals that, he got on Belichick's bad side and he never was able to, overcome that. I don't know, but he looks really good. They've needed like a shifty slot guy for years. I mean, the last couple of years, Juju was really good in that position, but he was more of a possession receiver. You throw it to him on 3rd and 6, and he fights for the yardage. Now you throw it to Gunnar or Steven Sims, they get into open space, and they can turn 3rd and 5 into a 15, 20-yard game with their elusiveness. So it's a different dynamic with this offense, but I think Gunnar's been really good. Steven Sims has been really good. I don't think Steven Sims is going to make the roster. I think they'll try to get him on the practice squad again. But, I mentioned it at the top. Calvin Austin's injury, it's not good, but at least they have depth there.
What's going on with Alex Highsmith? He had a great start to camp and has been hurt. Like, what's his status right now? Can we assume he's going to be ready for Cincy?
Well, it's a rib injury, and I think they're just being careful now. He's not going to play tomorrow night. He doesn't need to play in that Detroit game. We'll see if he gets back on the practice field next week. But he hasn't been out there for about 2 weeks, so we really haven't had a big update on that injury. Mike just continues to stay day to day with that, so we'll take him at his word. But do not expect to see him in Jacksonville. No, he will not play.
Raymond, I have a couple national questions for you here. First of all, what did you think of the Deshaun Watson penalty?
Once I heard the settlement talks were underway, you kind of knew it would be in that 10 to 12 range. I have no idea how they got to 11 other than saying, okay, we want to come back and put him in the most difficult situation possible, so we're going to have him play his first game in Houston. So I wasn't surprised at the number. I thought double digits was a good number. And, of course they wanted to settle because I think it was clear once the NFL didn't get what it wanted with the first ruling, it was going to go really, really hard on Deshaun with the second ruling. So I think it was smart for the NFLPA and for his lawyers to agree to a settlement. So at least that's over with. I mean, Deshaun's not saying the right things. He's creating more problems for himself. But at least the Browns and presumably Deshaun, they can move on now.
And what about your thoughts on Tom Brady? Is he coming back? I mean, the coach yesterday said he has no timetable for him coming back.
And what I know, Ron, there hasn't been an explanation. I know there's rumors that maybe there's a sick family member and, he's attending to those matters. I think Myles Garrett from the Browns has been away for like 4 or 5 days dealing with something similar. So you certainly understand it. If it's something like that, but he agreed to come back. I would assume Tom Brady's going to be back when it matters. But, those personal situations are never easy to predict.
Ron, may I engage Ray in a game of free association?
It's always a highlight for me, Joe. You don't have to ask.
You ready, Ray?
I am ready.
Miles Boykin makes the team, yes or no?
I'll say yes.
Presley Harvin, not Percy. Presley Harvin bounces back with a huge season as the punter.
I'll say better season. I don't know about huge.
Over under Connor Hayward touchdowns this season, 2.5.
I was thinking 3, so I'll go over.
Over under George Pickens touchdown catches, 8.5.
Oh, I was thinking 7 or 8, so I'll go under.
An item Ray Fittipaldo always includes when he's making a salad at a salad bar.
Tomatoes. Big tomato fan.
What do you think of that, Ron?
I know. I like it.
You agree with him?
Not my first choice, but I like tomatoes.
Anything crunchy, Ray?
Maybe cucumbers. I'm not a big crouton guy, but maybe some cucumbers.
Most confident to least confident on the offensive line. So you're most confident with this position all the way down to least confident with this position. Each one of them, you could just call them, left tackle, right tackle, center, right guard, left guard. You're most confident in which one?
Okay. I will go right tackle, center, right guard, left tackle, left guard.
We all have left guard
we
as
all
our least
have
confident.
left guard as the least confident.
For good reason.
Dan Moore is going to have a good, average, or bad season.
I'd settle for average.
DeMarvin Leal, his status, still a long-term project or possible? I liked a little of what I saw last week.
Yeah, I think he's definitely on the roster. They're not going to cut a third-round pick. I'm not going to tell you he's going to be active every week, but, I see progress too.
You think he can get in games and do something?
They're pretty deep on the D-line. I'm not going to say that, but he's a good young prospect.
Steelers will cover 6.5 in Cincy.
No.
Thank you, Ray.
Ray, I got a question for you. I got 3, actually,
Yeah.
and we did this the other day. Receiver who leads the team in catches.
Deontay.
Receiver who leads the team in receiving yardage.
I'll go Pickens.
And receiver who leads the team in touchdowns.
I'll go Deontay, but I think Pickens will be pretty close.
No Claypool there.
No Claypool
no
anywhere.
Freiermuth there.
Claypool's the number 3 receivers. It's just your 1 and your 2 are going to get the most targets. I'm not saying Claypool's going to have a bad year. I just don't think he's going to get targeted as much as his other guys.
Thank you, Raymond.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.